She decided to be a surrogate without even asking me, and now that the baby's here, she wants me to play dad. I said no, and that's when things got ugly. I never expected my marriage to end like this, but here we are, separated, counting down the days until a divorce can be finalized. It all started when my wife made a decision that shattered our family. She agreed to be a surrogate for her twin sister, without consulting me. They planned everything behind my back, and when she finally told me, it was clear my opinion didn't matter. Now, with the baby born, my wife is expecting me to step up, but I refuse to take responsibility for their choices. My wife and I are currently separated. We have to wait 12 months before we can officially divorce. She was meant to move out, but is having trouble finding a place nearby, so custody, 50-50, will be easier on our 3 kids. The reason for the divorce: my wife's twin sister asked her to be their surrogate. Apparently, they, wife SIL's husband, decided since they're twins, she was the best option, and that in 3 years, she'd carry another baby for them. This was all planned for weeks behind my back. I'll admit, they didn't start anything medically till after telling me. The telling me was basically my wife saying, "This is my body, my choice, and you have zero say, so either support me or we can divorce." It wasn't as blunt as that, but the longer version still pisses me off. I simply said if she did it, we would get divorced. Well, 4 months later, my wife tells me she's pregnant, and I filed 2 days later, which shocked everyone. Bill and Sil did everything in their power to shame, guilt me into changing my mind, but I just told them she is their responsibility. During the pregnancy, my wife acted like I should step up like I did in her previous pregnancies, and always got upset when I told her, "If you want 3 a.m. burgers, call your sister." For some reason, this made me the bad guy. She even called my mother to complain about me not stepping up, then got insulted when my mom pointed out she's pregnant with another man's child. Here's the major issue. SEL was in a car accident 2 days before my wife had their kid. She's currently in intensive care and her husband hasn't left her side. My wife has acted since the accident that I should be the kid's father until Bill Sil can take over. She called me a heartless monster when I wouldn't go with her to the delivery room and has demanded I help with the baby during the night. I've told her multiple times to call the child's father. He's the parent. He should be taking care and bonding with his kid because, as a parent, no matter how hard life gets, you still need to look after your kids. She makes excuses for him, so now I just ignore her. Today, I had the day off work, and my wife said since I was doing nothing for a few hours, I could watch the baby while she naps and showers. I said no. She started crying, saying she was sorry for going against me with the surrogacy, that she doesn't want to get divorced, and she desperately needs me to just take the baby for an hour. Again, I said, "Why don't you call Bill?" She didn't answer, just stared at me, so I said, "The newborn is your responsibility. Don't bother me about it again, and I suggest you start looking harder for a new place to live." She started screaming at me, calling me names and saying karma will get me, then packed a bag and left with the baby. I'm guessing she's at her mother's because her family and sister's husband have been calling all day. Eta for telling my wife the newborn is her responsibility and don't bother me? So, things escalated after my wife left with the baby. She's been staying at her mom's house and honestly, I've felt a bit of peace for the first time in months. The house is quieter, and I can focus on the kids without her constantly trying to guilt-trip me into helping with a situation I had no say in. But her family has made it their mission to drag me back into the chaos. They've been calling and texting me every day. The messages all boil down to the same thing. I'm cruel, selfish, and heartless for not stepping up. They say I'm abandoning my wife in her time of need, and her sister's accident was a tragedy that I should have some compassion about. Compassion? I had compassion when I didn't blow up their whole little plan the second I found out about it. I didn't go nuclear when my wife casually dropped, "By the way, I'm going to be a surrogate for my sister. This is happening whether you like it or not." I calmly told her if she went through with it, I was out. I don't think it's cruel to follow through on what I said, Her mom is the ringleader of the guilt parade. She's been calling me every night, leaving voicemails about how I'm not a real man if I can't step up for my wife while she's overwhelmed. I don't even listen to them anymore. I just delete them as soon as they come in. My mother, on the other hand, has been an MVP. She's got my back completely. When my wife complained to her that I wasn't helping enough, my mom said, "You're the one who wanted to play God with someone else's kid. You're not entitled to his help." That shut her up for about a day before she started crying to her mom again. But here's where it gets really weird. I found out why my wife's so desperate for me to take on this baby. Turns out, her sister's accident wasn't as minor as everyone let on. She's stable, but the recovery is going to take months, maybe even years. And her husband, the baby's biological father, has been talking to lawyers about guardianship. Not to keep the baby. Oh no, he's looking to pass the responsibility entirely onto my wife. Apparently, he's under the impression that since she carried the baby, she has some legal obligation to take care of it now that his wife can't. When I heard that, I laughed out loud. Not because it's funny, but because the audacity is unreal. This guy sat there with my wife and his wife, cooked up this ridiculous plan, ignored my feelings, and now he wants to make my wife legally responsible for his kid? I don't think so, but it does explain why my wife's been so frantic. She's probably terrified that he'll actually follow through, and honestly, I wouldn't put it past him. Now, about the kids. Our 3 kids have been doing okay with all this, but they're not blind to the drama. My oldest, who's 9, asked me why mom isn't home and if the new baby is her sibling. I told her no, it's her cousin, but she just looked confused. I don't blame her. None of this makes sense to a kid, and it's not exactly easy to explain without making mom look bad. I told her mom is helping auntie because auntie can't take care of the baby right now. She seemed to accept that, but I can tell she's still worried. The twins, who are 6, don't really get it. They just think the baby is visiting. One of them asked me if the baby is staying for Christmas, and I didn't even know how to answer. I just said, "We'll see." I'm trying to keep their lives as normal as possible while everything else is up in the air. Anyway, back to my wife. She showed up at the house 2 days ago, unannounced, with the baby. She looked exhausted. Dark circles, frazzled hair, the whole 9 yards. She asked if she could stay for the night because she couldn't handle it anymore. I told her no. I reminded her that she said she'd move out and that we're separated for a reason. She started crying, saying she has nowhere else to go and her mom's house is too cramped with the baby there. She begged me to just let her sleep on the couch for one night. Against my better judgment, I said yes. I figured one night wouldn't kill me, and honestly, I felt a little bad for her. But then, at 3 a.m., I woke up to the sound of the baby crying. I went to check what was going on, and my wife was just sitting on the couch, staring at the baby like she didn't know what to do. She asked me to help. I told her no, that she needed to figure it out because this was the life she chose. She started sobbing, saying she was sorry for everything, that she didn't think it would be this hard, and that she needed me. I don't know if it was the exhaustion or the guilt, but I told her to hand me the baby. I changed the diaper, gave the baby a bottle, and got it to sleep. My wife passed out on the couch and I went back to bed. The next morning, she thanked me and said she'd be out by the end of the week. Here's the kicker. Later that day, I got a call from her sister's husband. He asked me to meet him for coffee because he wanted to talk. I agreed, mostly out of curiosity. When we met up, he dropped a bombshell. He said he's not sure he can handle taking care of his wife and the baby, and he's considering putting the baby up for adoption. He said he feels terrible about it, but he doesn't see any other option. He even asked me if I thought my wife would take the baby permanently. I told him flat out that it's not my problem. If he and my wife want to figure something out, that's on them, but I'm not getting involved. He looked defeated and said he understood. But now I can't stop thinking about it. What if he really goes through with it? What if my wife agrees to take the baby? Where does that leave me and my kids? I have no idea what's going to happen next, but I'm bracing for the worst. This whole situation is a mess, and it feels like it's only going to get messier. Update 2. It's been a wild few weeks since my last update. I thought things couldn't get worse, but of course life had other plans. Let me just jump into what happened because it's a lot. So my wife stayed at her mom's for another week after that night. She texted me a couple of times asking if I could just take the baby for a few hours, but I shut it down every time. I made it clear that I wasn't getting involved. Meanwhile, her sister's husband, Bil, kept calling me too. He tried to guilt-trip me into convincing my wife to take full custody of the baby. His logic? You have 3 kids already. What's one more? Like, what part of not my kid does he not understand? Here's where things took a turn. I got a call from my wife one morning, and she was hysterical. Apparently, her mom had a meltdown and told her she couldn't keep staying there with the baby. I guess the constant crying and lack of sleep were too much for her. My wife begged me to let her come back to the house, just for a few days, until she could figure something out. I told her no. She got angry and said I was abandoning her and the baby in their time of need. I reminded her that the baby wasn't my responsibility and suggested she call Bill or literally anyone else in her family. 2 days later, I came home from work to find my wife sitting on our front porch with the baby. She looked completely defeated. She asked if we could talk, and for the sake of my kids, I agreed. She said she couldn't keep doing this alone and admitted she made a huge mistake by going through with the surrogacy without my support. She apologized for how she handled everything and said she wished she could go back and undo it all. It was the first time she'd actually owned up to how badly she messed up. But then she dropped the bombshell. She told me Bil wasn't planning to raise the baby at all. He'd been consulting with lawyers to figure out how to relinquish his parental rights entirely. His plan was to make my wife the baby's legal guardian until her sister recovered, if she recovered. I was floored. I asked her why she would even consider taking on that responsibility, and she just broke down crying. She said she felt like she had no choice because the baby had no one else. I told her point blank that I wasn't going to be part of this. I said if she wanted to take on full custody of the baby, that was her decision, but I wouldn't support it. I also made it clear that if she brought the baby back into the house, I'd leave. I wasn't trying to be heartless, but I've got 3 kids to think about, and they're my priority. She cried for what felt like an hour before finally leaving with the baby. Fast forward to last week. I got a call from Bill's lawyer. At first, I thought it was some kind of intimidation tactic, but nope. Turns out, Bill was trying to add me to some kind of emergency guardianship paperwork. The lawyer claimed that since I was still technically married to my wife, I could be seen as a default parental figure in the event my wife took custody of the baby. I shut that down immediately. I told the lawyer I had no involvement with the baby, had no intention of being involved, and would fight it tooth and nail if they tried to drag me into it. After that, I started taking steps to finalize the separation as soon as possible. I contacted my lawyer and explained the situation, and they assured me that I had nothing to worry about. But just to be safe, I started documenting everything: texts, calls, even the times my wife showed up unannounced with the baby. I'm not taking any chances with this. And then came the final twist. My wife showed up at the house one last time, but this time she wasn't alone. She had Bill with her, and they both looked desperate. They begged me to reconsider helping with the baby, at least temporarily, until they could figure something else out. I told them no, again. But then Bil said something that made my blood run cold. He said, "If you don't step up, I'll have no choice but to put the baby into the foster system." I don't know if it was a bluff or not, but it hit me hard. As much as I don't want anything to do with this situation, I couldn't imagine that baby ending up in foster care. I told them I needed time to think and sent them on their way. After they left, I talked to my mom about everything. She told me I wasn't responsible for cleaning up their mess and that I needed to protect myself and my kids first. She's right, of course. But it doesn't make this any easier. I don't want to see the baby suffer because of their terrible decisions. But at the same time, I know taking on any part of this would destroy me. So here's where I'm at. I've made it clear to my wife that she needs to figure this out on her own. I've told BIL that I'm not a backup parent and to stop trying to manipulate me into fixing his life. And as for the baby, I honestly don't know what's going to happen. I hope my wife and her family can step up and take responsibility, but if they don't, I guess the system will step in. I wish I had a satisfying conclusion to all of this, but there isn't one. My marriage is over, my wife is a mess, and the baby is caught in the middle of it all. All I can do now is focus on my kids and make sure they come out of this as unscathed as possible. Thanks to everyone who followed this mess of a story. It's been a nightmare, but it's also been a wake-up call. Some mistakes can't be fixed, and sometimes the best thing you can do is walk away.